Just man, just a disappointing way to start this season, especially with like all the like you know all the hype around this year with a full year of Sabonis and Fox and Brown and man, John, how are you feeling after these first three games?
Well, we said last week ahead of, the Portland game that it felt like just the beginning, like the point before you have a second date with somebody, because you don't really know what's happening, but everything is still optimistic. Like nothing bad's happened. Things can, like for the most part, you can't think of anything bad happening, and it hasn't happened yet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the second date has come and gone. The Kings have started 0-3. And I wouldn't say it's a complete disaster. We didn't walk out of the restaurant, saying we were going to go to the bathroom and leaving and blocking their phone number. Not something I've done before, but it may have happened to me a few times. But, the second date was interesting. We found out that this other person's weird little quirk isn't so cute anymore, but it's fixable. Probably, maybe good enough for a third date, but skeptical. And I think that's kind of where the Kings are at. And I think if you really look at the kind of range of issues, which we'll delve into today, it just seems like they're figuring it out. Like Brown's figuring out combinations. He's figuring out what the best, situations are. And it seems very varied depending on the game. And I guess, like, big picture, the Kings could have won each of these games. The Warriors game, the most recent one, maybe that shouldn't have been the case. But their offense kept them in it the whole time. We know this offense can score. The Clippers game, they really should have won that game. You make a few more free throws, they shot under 60% from the free throw line that game. And they lose the game by 2. And you got to give the Clippers credit. It's true. Paul George had a hell of a game. They were making tough shots, but you got to win that game on your home floor, especially. And then the first game, man, you really would have liked to have seen them get off to a better start. You would have thought that they would have gotten off to a better start. I definitely did. It was a complete, in the preseason, the Kings looked like they were way ahead of schedule, and the Portland Trail Blazers looked like a team that was just starting playing preseason games. Like a week later, the Kings didn't look like they knew what they were doing. And that kind of goes back into like trying to figure things out, which, they're going to try to do going forward. But that Portland game, Portland, I think, is better than I thought they were. I think Anthony Simons is way better than I imagined. I don't know why I knew he was a baller, but I didn't know he was like a killer. I don't know. And, obviously Jeremy Grant was a great pickup, and Josh Hart had a great game. I think Josh Hart and Winslow off the bench and Jeremy Grant all had at least one offensive rebounder. They were all very active on the glass. And then Hart and Grant had the 2 3-point play opportunities near the end of the game that basically won them and sealed them the game. But, the Kings made a lot of mistakes. They shouldn't have let a lot of those offensive rebounds happen, or those fouling and allowing 3-point plays. Like guys like Harrison Barnes not being able to stay in front of Jeremy Grant. But a lot of these things hopefully will get solved. Guys adjusting, lineups adjusting, who's going to be out there in certain situations, guarding certain guys. That'll change. And hopefully you'll start seeing wins. And people will point to the fact that they're playing a very tough stretch of the schedule here in these first few games. Portland was a formidable opponent. They're projected to be around the Kings in the standings the whole year. And then they have, obviously the Clippers, Warriors, Grizzlies, and Heat. And that Grizzlies and Heat game coming up, obviously, that's just like super difficult. But like Keegan Murray said, if you want to be a playoff team, and this is a rookie, if you want to be a playoff team, you got to beat playoff teams. So, I mean, we'll see. I don't know.
And to add on to that, I mean, this is the NBA where more than half of the teams in the league make the playoffs. I'm just kind of sick of hearing like we have a tough schedule ahead. Like, yeah, most stretches are going to be tough schedules. Like, rarely will you have like a 3 or 4 game stretch against teams that haven't made the playoffs like the year before or aren't fighting for the playoffs. It just
Mhm.
it just doesn't happen. There's no one in our division, or yeah, right, our division who's not. I mean, the Lakers are 0-3 as well, but I wouldn't say that's an easy game by any means. We got the Suns and the Clippers as well. And then I mean, who's worse than the Kings really in the Western Conference? The Rockets, um,
Thunder.
the Thunder. There's
I
only
thought
there's
the Jazz didn't the Jazz win their
Yeah, they're
first
like
two
3 and
games?
0. Yeah, no, I think they won their first three. Unless there's like this
Yeah,
is
they're.
yeah,
Let me look it up.
they're definitely 3 and 0 at least. And if they play Monday
Yeah,
night,
they are 3-0, and they played. Shoot, I don't know. Let me get ahead of this. They played a night against Houston. They played one of those like back to back against the same opponent, or not a back to back, but 2 games against the same opponent.
oh, okay,
The old Houston Rockets, which you just said were one of those teams that's definitely not competing.
yeah,
Um,
and
so look at the
so
Jazz.
yeah, I know, crazy, but it just there's not many of those teams in the NBA that aren't, like you said, a formidable opponent. Or even those playing teams you can count as formidable opponents now, just because they have that playing status kind of. I mean, there's a difference between top tier teams and not top tier teams, but I don't know. I don't know. The NBA is it's a tough league, and the Western Conference tough, and our division's tough. But kind of going back to these first 3 games, especially that Portland game, it was frustrating because you look at the first 3 games, you look at the first 5 games, and that's the one you can probably win, like the most likely chance. And it was just upsetting to see the Kings play so well in preseason, and then they come out opening night and they just looked completely different. And I know Keegan Murray wasn't there, and although he's a rookie, I mean, I think he means a lot to this team already, and you could see that in the next 2 games where he actually played. But it was, yeah, that first quarter was just horrendous, and that's not what you wanted to see the Kings start the year off like, especially at home. I felt like the ball movement was just very minimal to what we saw in preseason, and it's kind of just like like what changed? Like I get the competition's better, but you can keep moving the ball still. I just felt like that kind of they strayed away from that a little too much, and it was frustrating. It was just frustrating to see they just look like a completely different team than what they did the previous 4 games. And like, why would you
Yeah,
why would you not just continue with that? So
and in credit to Portland, but also no credit to Sacramento or no slack to Sacramento. In that Portland was physical. They attacked the ball. They surrounded Sabonis. They played a zone early. They came at him with a good game plan, and it was a game plan that in the preseason you don't see, obviously. And I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily attribute it to like the Kings not being good or the Kings being too overconfident coming into the season or whatever you might hear. It's just like they're figuring it out, and they figured out some things, and they played good spurts of basketball in that game. Like I said, they could have won it, but it's like Portland was super physical, and that seemed to really work. Um, and contrast it with like the Warriors game. The Warriors game, they were just like whereas against the Clippers, the Kings did a pretty good job getting back in transition. But they could not do that against the Warriors very much. There's just too many times where just Andrew Wiggins was getting down there after the Kings score, just getting an easy bucket or just on a one-on-one attempt down the court in transition. And it's just like, man. So it's just like it's a mix of issues. And again, it just kind of goes down to matchups, I think, and as a large part. But you were there on opening night. That just, I mean, like I said, like not reason why people might think it's like, okay, there was a little bit of overconfidence kind of surrounding everybody. Diehard fans that know and have been disappointed, that have had the blood drained out of them by this team for more than a decade now. You know, everybody was high on this team, and so it's just like that. That was disappointing, but they'll figure it out, or they have a chance to figure it out. I don't know. They could still. Anything can happen, and I think that was one thing everybody did admit. While everybody was kind of high on this team, everybody was also just like, anything can happen. And also, I'm not making any judgments about this team. It's 3 games, 82 game season, very long. If they started off 3-0, I'd be saying the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. It is very early into the season, and but I mean, the reason to be skeptical remains, and the Kings have a ton to prove, and it is just 3 games, and I'm not going to overreact or anything, but it is just disappointing, and it's like a lot of people are saying, look, it just looks like the same old Kings, like losing in Portland to start off the year, with some just lousy basketball and terrible free throw shooting against the Clippers, and then a 50-point second quarter and an 89-point half, third most of all time, third most points scored in a half all time. And just like these little things that just make you think back and like, oh man, it sounds like the same old Kings. And I'm not saying it is, but you definitely see similarities. And it is a new system under Brown and a lot of new players, and I don't know. It's frustrating. I'm not going to try to get too upset about it, but it is a long season, and I'm confident in Brown and his coaching staff to work out the kinks and get those better combinations on the floor. Like you were saying, he's still trying to figure out his good lineups, and but the Kings, they're going to have a lot to prove this season, a lot to overcome, and it's going to be like that until they they end that playoff drought. And De'Aaron Fox even went on that Draymond Green podcast, and they were talking about the playoff drought a little, and he was saying like, we're sick of hearing it. And I think Barnes even spoke on it, not the podcast, but spoke on the playoff drought about just how these new guys, they're like, they're not attached to the playoff drought like we are. Like Kevin Huerter, he's been here for 3 games. Like the playoff drought doesn't affect him like it affects like the fans, and or like maybe a franchise player like De'Aaron Fox, who's entering his 5th season here. And so I get it. Like they're tired of it. I'm tired of hearing it, or maybe don't care so much. But regardless, it is there, and it shouldn't affect them really. But it definitely affects how the media sees us, and how other teams will see us as well going forward. So
yeah. And it can hurt, I don't know, all-star chances too.
Yeah.
I think, didn't Brown say that, Fox should be an all-star as long as we're not losing games? I think he said that before the game, one of the games of the back-to-back. And it's just like, yeah, it's true. It's true. But you know what? You got to be honest. If they beat Memphis or Miami, like all it takes is one win against a good team, and people will be like, oh, okay. Like, okay, so they can do it all of a sudden. And then, you got Charlotte, and you'll have a nice trip to, oh man, then you go to Miami, and then you got Orlando, Golden State again. Just looking far ahead there. I guess you got to take it one at a time. But like I said, if they beat Memphis or beat Miami, start with Memphis. If they beat Memphis, the narrative will shift a tiny bit, but also a pretty discernible amount. So
yeah, it will just take that one win, and it'll feel nice once we get it, especially starting off 0-3. You're hoping they'd at least have one win by now, but it's like I said, like I'm kind of sick of the tough schedule. But I mean, there's definitely not a lot of easy wins, or supposedly easy wins coming up, and like Keegan Murray is saying, you're gonna have to beat playoff teams, and they'll have a couple chances in their next 2 games to do that against Miami and Memphis, and they can do it. And it just seems like they're still trying to get the hang of it. So